Hey everyone, this is Eddie Kalegi with Tim Moore reminding you that SportsSpeak is now powered by SeatGeek. SeatGeek is the one-stop shop for tickets to sporting events, concerts, and so much more.
Use the promo code SportsSpeak at checkout for $20 off your first purchase.
SeatGeek, let there be live. Now, on to the show.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 148 of SportsSpeak. I'm Tim Moore, alongside Brett Hawn here today. And Brett, of course, Eddie going through a little bit of technical difficulties, so things have to change up a little bit. Of course, seems like College Avenue had a little bit of power issues, causing a little bit of chaos with his internet. However, here today on this episode of SportsSpeak, of course, always powered by SeatGeek, we're going to be talking about NFL football, particularly Monday Night Football. You were in the stadium in East Rutherford, MetLife Stadium, for the unfortunate torn Achilles of Aaron Rodgers. And what was really a spectacular game, the Jets walk it off. Is it Xavier Gibson? Tayshaun Gibson? Well, I always forget his first name. I just know it's Gibson. I watch him on Hard Knocks. Kid's spectacular, great punt returner. Is it Xavier Gibson? What's his first name? Yeah. So either way, walked off with the touchdown. What a touching story, by the way, for him to make the team through everything, and the fact that the Jets are 1-0 to open up the season. But now you got to focus things up towards week 2 of Dallas Cowboys football. First off, I guess let's talk about Monday night. How was the energy going into a game like that? The feel, you feel like you finally got that quarterback that's going to change it. To me, from watching from TV at home, the energy looked incredible in regards to the fans. 9/11 tribute, of course, which unfortunately, as of the moment, will go down as the biggest Aaron Rodgers highlight in New York, was absolutely remarkable. I thought they did what was touching there. But from your perspective, how exciting was it, even just before the game began?
Yeah, just to put it into perspective, I left my house to try and get to my seat at 7:30. I left at 5:30. I didn't get to my seat until about 8:17. So the traffic was the most I've ever sat in. I mean, I heard they oversold tickets by like 1,000. So there are 80,000 people in that stadium. The energy was the loudest I've ever heard at a Jets game in my entire life. When Rodgers was running out of that tunnel, I was still on the line to show them my ticket, and you could hear the stadium roar. I mean, even from the outside, it sounded like something straight out of a Coliseum. I mean, it was absolutely insane. And then you get in, and Rodgers is making the first drive. Everybody's cheering, and the collective gasp when he got hurt, and the silence that followed was just like it was the biggest shift I've ever heard in my life. It was like all the collective voices just were waiting in agony and pure anxiety. I mean, for me, from my vantage point, I sat in the corner of the opposite end zone, so I thought it was one of the linemen. So in my head, I'm like, all right, like who would match the description here? I'm like, it can't be Max Mitchell. He's on the right side. It can't be him. Wes Schweitzer, maybe, but I don't think he'd be in the game, right? And then somebody next to me was like, it's Aaron Rodgers. And I'm thinking, I'm like, this dude's full of shit. Typical pessimistic Jets fan energy. I'm like, nah, this can't be it. And so then I look at my phone, and sure enough, Rappaport's like, Rodgers, the cart's coming out. Then I see the cart coming out of the tunnel. I'm like, of course. Of course. So, what can you do? It's typical Jets fan luck, but the game itself was absolutely incredible. The energy really started picking up after that Garrett Wilson catch in the end zone. That's when really people started getting loud and into it again. My shoulders hurt the next day because we were jumping up and down, like we were hitting each other in the arms, and like no fighting, but like the playful, just like jabs and stuff. And it was the best game I've ever been a part of.
I think you mentioned the moment of the Aaron Rodgers injury. Really, because the way TV does things are amplified no matter what happens in terms of audio. Things are always going to sound louder than what they even may actually be. But how silent did it get once people realized Aaron Rodgers was unfortunately the one down? You just mentioned that moment, obviously, where you couldn't tell who was down. But once everybody realized, I mean, could you practically hear a pin drop while you were in the stadium once they realized QB1 is the guy that's down on the ground?
Absolutely. Imagine 80,000 roaring voices and not a single hush or peep as soon as he went down. Literally, the sound the sound difference was so drastic, and you could tell. And that energy carried through pretty much until the end of the third quarter. It was absolutely mind boggling. It's as a New York Jets fan, I've come to I've come to terms with this kind of stuff happening, but I didn't expect it to happen the first 4 plays. I thought he was going to get at least 2 games in, 3 games in, then it was going to happen. But like 4 plays in, I mean, it broke everybody's heart. You could tell the shift right away.
Now, of course, throughout the game, regardless with or without Aaron Rodgers, this team battled. The defense lived up to its expectations of last season, especially forcing, was it 3 interceptions, I think it was, of Josh Allen throughout the game. I mean, talk to me first off about just watching that defense from in person as well, because, I mean, when I look at that defense, of course, the first start's Quentin Williams, absolute beast, behemoth. He is just so good at getting into the backfield, and really, he's what I would argue is the most balanced defensive tackle in the NFL in regards to he can push running backs back on the run, stop you at the line of scrimmage, and he can be just as good of a pass rusher. Honestly, the biggest comparison, granted, now he's more of a defensive end, but when he first started in the league, played a bit more in a defensive tackle role. Really, I'd say he's very equivalent to a guy like Aaron Donald, where you just know that no matter what you do, you can double team him, triple team him. He's almost unstoppable at the line of scrimmage. And there's very few guys right now you can say that. The only other one right now in the league I could probably say that is maybe Micah Parsons when you think about it, but that's simply because of his speed. But Quentin Williams, absolutely impressive. And the secondary, I mean, Sauce Gardner, you could just tell looked unfazed from the first snap. But what does this tell? When you see this defense get 3 interceptions and arguably, I don't want to say the best, because I think Patrick Mahomes is the best quarterback in the league still today, regardless of what happens, but I'd say maybe the second or third best quarterback in the NFL. How does it feel knowing that you're watching this team dominate again defensively, knowing that after last season, you weren't sure if you can replicate this success again?
Oh, it's special. It takes me back to 2009 and 2010. I mean, we haven't had a defense of that caliber since those playoff runs. And really, I feel like the main difference between these two teams is that the Jets in the modern era have a better pass rush. I mean, you alluded to Quentin Williams. His get-off time is as good as anybody in the league. And his run defense is equally as potent. He really sets the tone for that defensive line. It's hard for an offense to establish rhythm. You alluded to it earlier. Josh Allen, he threw 3 interceptions. He fumbled the ball once. He should have fumbled it twice. That one call is bullshit. There should have been 2 fumbles. And he was sacked 5 times. I mean, the Jets defense had their way with the Bills. And really, this unit is just so talented and has like depth from really on all 3 levels, something I've never seen in my lifetime, to where now it's really, how far can Zach Wilson take them? That's really the whole narrative behind the Jets, because you have an amazing defense. You have the offensive line. Sure, it has its struggles, but you saw it in run blocking. It was pretty solid, I would say. And Aaron Rodgers goes down. Now it's up to Zach Wilson, and we'll see where this team goes. But I still have no faith in Zach Wilson at all.
Well, I know a lot of people, and I guess that was going to be my next question now that we talked about the defense transitioning over to the offense and replacement, right? Zach Wilson now is the guy yet again. Does it give you a little bit more confidence? Because to me, it kind of does, even though he may be away from the team 4 or 5 weeks, whatever it is. And I know a lot of people may not want to see Aaron Rodgers on the sidelines, right? Knowing that you like to see him in a football aspect, not as much a coaching, but do you think that Zach Wilson can have a little bit of beneficiary, just like how he kind of had in the preseason? Not exactly having Aaron Rodgers calling plays, but talking to him pre-snap, getting him mentally ready. Because I felt like that really benefited Zach Wilson before this year began, and it shows a little bit of growth in terms of his decision-making.
Yeah, I agree with you there. I mean, having a veteran mentor like Rodgers, especially somebody who's been in the league for 18 years, he's a future first ballot Hall of Famer, one of the best quarterbacks to ever play the game. That definitely does wonders to not only improve Zach's confidence, but ease his stress. One of the biggest things I've noticed with Zach, on top of the abysmal decision making, is he looks nervous in the pocket. He never looks comfortable, and really, I feel like all that mental from a mental standpoint, having a guy like Rodgers who's been there, who's had his struggles, who has a Super Bowl, but has endured rough stretches after rough stretches in the playoffs, that's somebody that you can lean on, that you can ask questions, that you can really pick his brain. And I feel like throughout the offseason, you've seen Zach's willingness to learn and to get better. It's just a matter of putting it all together. I'm sure he didn't even expect to be thrusted in that soon. He surely expected to be sitting for at least this year. But unfortunately, in the NFL and the way the injury landscape works, that's not always the possibility. So really now it's about taking what he learned in the offseason and applying it early, because he's going to have to if this Jets team has any hope of making the playoffs.
Yeah, absolutely. He's going to have to show adaptability and really a lot quicker than what Jets fans unfortunately thought. Let's talk about somebody else, though, on the offense. Breece Hall made his return and looked explosive immediately. 2 carries, I think it was 109, 105, something like that. Either way, over 100 yards for Breece Hall coming back. There's going to be a lot of questions moving forward with this Jets team. Of course, you have superstar Dalvin Cook as well in the backfield, who got most of the carries, had a pretty decent day considering the carry total as well, but wasn't, of course, as explosive as Breece. Do we think Breece Hall will end up taking the number 1 running back job as this season progresses, as originally anticipated? Or do we think the superstar capability of Dalvin Cook is going to serve, its dominance throughout the season?
Yeah, I mean, I think the Jets are fully committed to a running back committee. They have 4, in my opinion, 4 really solid backs in that room. You got Dalvin Cook that you mentioned. I mean, he's a little bit in decline, but he still showed the ability to be a bruiser in that room and brings Pro Bowl pedigree. Breece Hall, it looked like he didn't even tear his ACL. I mean, he busted out an 80-yard run on his second carry and finished the game with 10 rushes for 100, I think it's 127, 130 yards. I mean, even if he slowed down, that's still wicked good efficiency over the course of the game, right? Michael Carter, don't forget, that could be some team's second or even starting guy. So having him as a third is absolutely incredible. And then we saw flashes of what rookie Israel Abanikanda could do in the preseason. He's a speed power guy as well. So really, I can't see the Jets being like, okay, like here, Breece, have a workhorse role. It's definitely going to be a balanced attack as long as all guys are healthy. And that's what they should do. Because with Zach Wilson, you need to have, in a way, I'm not comparing Daniel Jones to him, but I'm saying, like, in terms of the situations, you look at both New York teams, having a strong run game is paramount. And I think the Jets keeping those bodies fresh is going to be at the center of their identity. And I don't see why it shouldn't be.
Well, when you think about it, too, of course, those backs are going to be the main focus, which now I guess want to shift things forward to next week, or really Sunday. Of course, we're, filming this episode here on Friday, so 3 days away. The New York Jets are going to take on the Dallas Cowboys, a team that absolutely murdered my New York Giants, if I may say. This is the first time.
I'm sorry about that, man.
Video, you were seeing my reaction to the dominance of the Dallas Cowboys. That's unfortunate because that's the Giants winning that game. Of course, they came far from doing so, but and I'll talk about that in a little bit as well on my perspective before we end the episode. But overall, the Dallas Cowboys defense, we watched them dominate New York, but there was one weakness that was presented throughout that game, and that was still the rushing capabilities of the Giants offense that was able to kind of expose a little bit of the Dallas Cowboys defense. Do we feel, of course, I know Zach Wilson as well at the end of that game, right? Makes a big throw to Garrett Wilson. Garrett Wilson, I still feel is an absolute superstar receiver, but without Aaron Rodgers, it's going to be unfortunate because the one thing about Zach Wilson in the past is Zach Wilson does not like to throw in the seams. He does not like throwing in the seams at all. He's not very good with quick reads. That goes with his decision making. He likes being on the run and kind of making space that way. That to me doesn't exactly function well in the NFL unless you're a mobile quarterback like Lamar Jackson or Kyler Murray and so on. But the point is, either way, this offensive lines can have a real big battle on its hands against the Dallas Cowboys defense. I feel like if the Jets are going to win this game, and not because Dallas's defense dominated the Giants, I feel like the Jets have a much better experienced offensive line than what the Giants had. But I feel like if you're going to control this game, you have to, I don't want to say exactly take the Philadelphia Eagles approach of what they just did yesterday on Thursday Night Football with DeAndre Swift, for example. But you do need to control the line of scrimmage. And I feel just power run the heck out of Dallas because they just simply, when the Giants did that in that first drive especially, were clueless against it until the Giants really started bunching up in tight formations.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. And you touched on it. Like the offensive line has to step up this game. They have to. Because the number one thing, and I noticed this against the Bills too, is that there's not going to be a lot of dial-ups of passing plays to stretch the field. It's like you said, standing in the pocket isn't Zach Wilson's strong suit. Unfortunately, it's getting out and, making plays with his legs. But you can't really do that without the run game setting the tone. Because if the run game doesn't set the tone, then they're just going to send constant rushes at you. And you saw what Micah Parsons could do firsthand against your Giants. And it doesn't matter if he's double team, triple team, whatever. He has his set moves that he can still use his speed and athleticism to easily bull rush offensive tackles. And for the Jets, they don't have experienced tackles. Sure, Dwayne Brown is, he has multiple Pro Bowl appearances, but he's also 37 years old. How much can you really expect him to do? If he lines up on the right side, Max Mitchell, he doesn't inspire much confidence in that offensive line or in him. So for the Jets, it's really about, the running backs and the offensive line setting the tone early. I completely agree with your power rush take. It's just a matter of, can they push the defensive line or defensive front of the Cowboys back enough? That's something I don't know. Now, as a Jets fan, the number one thing I want to see is just Zach Wilson use that arm strength we saw in the BYU video. But realistically, like the decision making, like you were saying, just isn't there yet. The processing speed is way slower compared to the average quarterback. I think his time last year was close to 3.5 seconds, which is way below league average. So I mean, it really comes down to what can the run game do to make it easier on Zach? Because if they don't, then it's going to be a long afternoon.
No, you look at it on the opposite side of the football. In my utter opinion, and I'm not saying this again because I'm a Giants fan, but I really felt that Dak Prescott also in that game did not really play that well offensively as what most may perceive. Of course, I mean, when you have a special teams touchdown as well as a pick six, that really helps overall set the tempo throughout the game. But Dak Prescott, I'm pretty sure this week, it's not set yet, will be down Brandon Cooks. Looks like he has he has a sprained MCL, I want to say it is. I could be wrong. Either way, he's battling through a sprain, and it is very likely that he will not be playing this week, which means you're going to have both Gallup and CeeDee Lamb getting a main focus along with the young tight end Ferguson on the passing offensive end. Tony Pollard as well, really, to be honest with you, didn't have that explosive of a week last week. I felt he still had a decent week, but overall, the point is the Dallas Cowboys offense, I still feel, is relatively healthy and clean outside of Cooks, and it has a lot to prove. And you mentioned, of course, the Warriors, Zach Wilson. You want to see something. If the Jets defense can match what it did last week, you have to feel somewhat confident that this team can win a Super Bowl with or without Aaron Rodgers. And I know it sounds crazy because we're just 2 weeks in, but if you're telling me this team could still, without Aaron Rodgers, hold on, beat the Buffalo Bills, which rather they're a Super Bowl team or not, is a consistent in the last 5 years of being in the playoffs, or I'd say consistent constant. There we go. That's what I was thinking of. A consistent constant of being in the playoffs throughout the last 5 years, right? You know you've got something special. But if you could beat the Dallas Cowboys, a team that, isn't exactly a Super Bowl favorite, but we know is easily a playoff caliber team and is in the discussion every year, you have to feel really good in terms of the sense of direction of what this team can do against good football teams in the NFL. And you really do have to get that sense that, Zach Wilson still may not be the answer, but this team can play these close, tight games and play meaningful, productive football. And dominate the time of possession. For example, something the New York Giants did last year, which is a big reason why they won a lot of games through Saquon Barkley and Daniel Jones mixing up the run game and so on, to put themselves in possession or in potential to win these games through dominating times of possession.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. And the New York Jets, the defense last year finished as a top 4 unit. In this first game, first off, where did Jordan Whitehead come from? First of all, the man hit his incentive for interceptions in a season in 1 week. That in of itself was impressive. And secondly, like Jordan Whitehead, don't forget, when he's coming from Tampa, he wasn't known as a turnover guy. He was known as a box safety. He's going to give you, he's a hard hitter. He's going to give you help and run support. He never flashed anything close to this in pass protection before. So really, I think, with Cooks out and having CD and Gallup in there, the safeties are going to play even more of a prominent role. And a question I have is, can Jordan Whitehead continue his upward surge? And then you also, you look at the defensive line. They, again, have to set the tone early with the rush. John Franklin Myers had a hell of a week last week. Jermaine Johnson had a sack. And Quinnen Williams, he's the man freeing everything up. I mean, he just has to continue to go in and do his thing, prove why he's getting $20 million plus a year. And really, I think they can. The biggest thing is I think they can. There's years in past where, okay, the Jets have really good defensive lines. We remember with Sheldon Richardson, remember with Muhammad Wilkerson, Damon Snacks Harrison. I miss that guy, man. He was incredible.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, you know, as a Giants fan.
We had Snacks for a year. Love that guy, man.
Yeah.
Such a good guy.
So, but like point being, with that defense, it was only strong in one area. It was strong in the defensive line. The secondary scared the crap out of you. Calvin Pryor over there. I mean, that's enough said, So, but like, this defense is so well-rounded that I think, and I don't even think, I'm sure that this 1 week showing against a competent NFL offense is not a mirage. I think this is something that they can do. Now, it's about the rest of the team collectively gathering around and doing something with that, because this team is special. Are they a Super Bowl contender with Zach Wilson? I'm going to be honest, I'm not ready to say that. Do I think they can make the playoffs? Definitely. You just got to see how the season unfolds. But if they go 2-0 against the Cowboys, they're able to squeak out a win, then that's a really great start, because their first 9 weeks are tough.
And you mentioned the first 9 weeks being tough, but again, and goes to ask the question again. Of course, you may not see them as a Super Bowl favorite, but you'd have to imagine if they win this game. I feel like it goes both ways, right? From a Jets fan perspective. If you win this game, you're like, all right, this team's competitive. It's here to stay, with or without Rodgers. We're going to fight every week to be, in a spot to win and make the playoffs, do something productive. But if Dallas turns around and the defense does what it did against the Giants and absolutely mollywops the Jets in this game, then how do you feel? Because then it's like, all right, well, Zach's obviously not doing good. We faced a defense that, and by the way, we're talking about potentially two of the best defenses in the league this weekend. That's the other thing I shouldn't underrate. In my opinion, the Jets have the best defense in the league. The second best is the Dallas Cowboys, but others may argue, because Dallas has been up there causing turnover galore throughout the past 3 seasons, pretty much with their defense. But overall, I can understand the sense from a Jets fan perspective, right? That this season can go a total different direction if they don't show up here on Sunday and don't play productive enough football to be competitive to win against the Dallas Cowboys. Is that fair to say that this? I don't want to say the season could be over, but I can get the sense of it's kind of on a balancing teeter. Is that fair?
Yeah, no, that's completely fair, and I agree with your analogy. To me, like, for me as a fan, and as an outsider looking in, like, it's a week by week thing. With Aaron Rodgers, obviously the excitement around having such a star quarterback in your room. First off, we haven't had it in a long time, right? And second off, because you had it and because you've never experienced it before, you're kind of like, okay, this is what we can do. This is here we go. This is like the team ready to compete for a Super Bowl. But with Zach, it's different. There's not a large body of work. There's not a lot of real tape to go off of outside of last year's showings, and they weren't particularly impressive. So really, every week you go into it and you're like, okay, you know the defense can contend. You know the running game is like among the top 5 in the league. You know that the Jets have skill position players, but if they can grind out a win with their quarterback situation every week, that's huge. And a team like Dallas, yes, Dak Prescott had a horrible week last week. He didn't have to do good with the way the defense was playing and the way that the run game was able to get going. Even though Tony Pollard wasn't wicked efficient, he still did have 2 touchdowns on the ground. And Turpin had one of his own, right? So he didn't really have to do much. But at the same time, if you're the New York Jets, right, you're looking at this and you're like, okay, let's not rush to conclusions here. Let's take it week by week. And I really think that's what they're doing. The biggest thing, too, that I want to add on for the next point is this is the team this is the first time in years that I've seen a team with such resolve and fight. I mean, you saw it with Xavier Gibson. We talked about him earlier. The biggest thing from his presser after the game was, I did it for AR. That's huge. The camaraderie and the team chemistry that this team possesses really can take you anywhere. So you just go week by week, and you see how they play against top competition. Dallas represents a very tough test.
No, indeed, Dallas represents a pretty tough test, and I'll ask one last Jets question before we head to the final topic, of course, which is my New York Football Giants. But if they beat Dallas, let's say, right, and things feel like it's going in a positive direction, what is that team on the schedule that they will face throughout the rest of this regular season that may convince you, okay, this Jets team still has it without Aaron Rodgers? Because you mentioned you don't feel like it could be a Super Bowl team, but can they, if they keep up this positivity and beat Dallas, or I should say, who is it on the schedule that if they beat, you could say, okay, I'm convinced now?
Yeah, the biggest thing for me is how they play against the Chiefs, because they do have a regular season matchup. Patrick Mahomes, like you alluded to earlier, is the best quarterback in the league. That offense is lights out, and it's going to be hard to contain them. For the New York Jets, that's going to be their biggest both defensive and offensive test. If they're able to at least, even if they don't win, if they're able to keep pace, that will do wonders for the confidence around the team and the confidence in the fan base. So that's the game I'm really keeping an eye on.
Yeah, so that'll definitely be one to watch as well as time continues on. Of course, the New York Jets, as you mentioned, first it was 8-9 weeks, very very difficult schedule. But if you come out 4-0, to open up the year, which I mean, even I'd say the typical Jets fan, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, typical Jets fan though would say they'd be happy 2-2, 3-1 to open up the year, with considering how tough the schedule is. But needless to say, that'll be great to watch moving forward. And also another thing, because of course you mentioned Chiefs, we won't go to deep discussion about, but man, what will it mean if they struggle yet again, making catches and doing things here to open up week 2? Because I would not have believed that, yes, granted, Philadelphia is 2-0 to open up the year, that the two teams that we just saw in the Super Bowl last year would look abysmal offensively to open up the season. I mean, Philadelphia yesterday, if it wasn't the mixed match of the turnovers, it's a little bit difficult. But we're gonna head to the final topic here in this, and it is the New York Football Giants. Man, am I devastated after week 1, but I have and you can debate here a little bit with me, but I have a little bit of a dispute to why the New York Giants struggled on Sunday. I'm not exactly giving them an excuse, but I do want to point this out. The rain and downpour we saw on a brand new football field for the New York Giants, because I think the Giants, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I really don't pay that much attention to preseason as much, outside of maybe the Giants-Jets game, just because, not because it's Aaron Rodgers getting his first snaps, but that's your first actual look of New York on both sides. For me, overall, the Giants didn't really get much time at home to experience with the field conditions, and I'm not saying that's the full reason, but you mix that fact that there's new conditions on the field, you mix the fact that there was torrential downpour for something like, to an extent that we have not seen that I can recall in a Giants or a Jets game to its extent of how hard it was raining in probably about 10 to 12 years. So you mix that with a slow offensive line and a very speedy pass rush to the Dallas Cowboys. I think that is a big reason why Dallas set the tone and dominated immediately. And I truly would like to think that this offensive line is much better than last season's, but the Giants simply just never adjusted. Coach Stable, who never ever gets outcoached, I will argue got outcoached on Sunday, but I don't think that happens again the rest of this season because I just felt that they kept going to these tight formations when realistically they should be going to regular 2 tight end sets, work out of I form and so on, like they did when they struggled against Dallas last year. But I feel there is no way this offensive line can be any worse than last season. They just simply weren't ready to play week 1.
Yeah, no, I agree. And the biggest outlier was tackle Evan Neal. Just really looked outclassed. He in terms of that preparation aspect, weather does play a part. I completely agree. Torrential downpour certainly does not help the passing game by any stretch. It doesn't even help with carrying the ball, period. I mean, you saw plays where Giants receivers catch the ball and then immediately after contact, that ball just slipped right out, go a few yards down the field, the Cowboys would pick it up, right? Rain plays a huge part. And I'm not going to sit here and say it was the full reason because there are ways around it.
There's 2 teams on the football field. Didn't struggle for Dallas. I want to point that out too. I'm not giving the Giants excuses, but I'm saying from an offensive line perspective, when you have a slow interior offensive line, guys like Glowinski, who felt like he was getting beaten every single snap on the field, it just doesn't mesh when you're in really wet conditions and you have no, mobility or stability dropping back, to get into protection. I felt that it played to the Dallas Cowboys' favor. And for the record, again, I mentioned it earlier, I don't feel Dallas really played that great of offense throughout the game either. That if you eliminate the, field goal block as well as the pick six, the Giants defense keep you in a competitive look throughout this game, being down 2 or 3 possessions, considering the field position turn through everything. So I feel like overall, when it's all said and done, I felt like neither team really had a benefit offensively, even though the Giants can create pressure. That's just my perspective on it, at least.
Yeah, no, I can agree to an extent. I felt as though the Cowboys did a very good job of establishing their run, their rushing attack, and that was really the biggest factor for me. Dak Prescott didn't really have to do too much. He finished with under 200 yards passing, and really like didn't play his best football. So the fact that the Cowboys were able to do all that despite Dak not being there, it just showed how much of an impact that Cowboys defense had on Sunday night. And that's the biggest thing for them is their defensive line. Micah Parsons is arguably one of the best, if not the best, defensive player in the league right now, one of, right? And he's somebody that impacted the game right away, made a difference. The Giants offensive line, you alluded to it, they are a little slow. They're very, very, Evan Neal, like, to me, was painful to watch. Absolutely painful to watch. But he is a young offensive lineman. It is known for younger guys that they take longer to develop, especially in the trenches. So it's not something where I would side with, the Giants fans on Twitter who are always in panic. I would wait another week or two, see how they play. They got a comfortable matchup against the Cardinals this week. If they can't beat Arizona, then I think you should be scared.
Right.
But Arizona is dog water. So you guys should have no problem with them at all.
That's what I'm going to say to finish things off overall is that, I'm not in panic. Everybody, by the way, whoever is reporting about Brian Dable having a party, do some investigative journalism next time to realize that he was celebrating his son's or his daughter. I don't know, but Brian Dable has so many kids. But the point is, I think it's his son's 6-year-old that just turned 6, celebrating their birthday. It wasn't for players. It wasn't things for being exciting. But people, for some reason, wanted to bring that up that a day before the biggest game of his career, quote unquote, that he was choosing to celebrate. That's not the point. It's as simple as this. Dallas came. Dallas dominated. And at the end of the day, when it's all said and done, listen, congratulations to the Dallas Cowboys. We'll see what happens in Jerry's world later this season in November. But if the New York Football Giants do not play productive football this week against Arizona, then I will have reason for concern. I still feel like this team can go 11-6 this season. I truly don't think that game one of the year was a true telling point. And I also want to make this one last point before we wrap things up overall, that we've seen this happen 2 times before. I think I sent it in the fantasy group chat. This happened to the New England Patriots back in 2003, and they went on to play in the Super Bowl, as well as one other team that ended up, I believe it was the Lions, that ended up playing in the NFC Championship game. However, that's going to wrap things up here from episode 148 here of Sports Speak. Brett, thank you for coming on. Where can people find you as well?
Tim, thank you for having me. If you go on the Sports Speak website, my podcast, Totally Goated, is on there. I wrote a couple blog posts. Still very new to the blogging scene, but we're going to try to upgrade that as we can. And my direct link to my Spotify is there. You're definitely going to want to check the show out.
Indeed. The Twitter media, anything real quick as well where people can follow you?
Yes. Oh, that's true. Totally Goated on Twitter and on Instagram.
Just wanted to at least get you to get it out there. Of course, Totally Goated podcast, big part of us here in Sports Speak as well as Motorsports Today. However, that's going to wrap things up from episode 148 here on Sports Speak. I've been Tim Moore saying so long, and a reminder to use promo code SportsSpeak at checkout at purchase, virtue of SeatGeek, for 20% off for brand new users. However, thank you for watching, and we'll see you next time for episode 149.